Hi everyone, welcome to the Tropic Marin channel. Today we're gonna talk about water chemistry. Tropic Marin also has the ICP now available for customers. The ICP water analysis that gives you all the relevant elements that can be measured with the ICP, and then the ICP Plus that gives you a little extra like nutrients, certain elements that you cannot measure with the ICP. But there's a video about these types of analysis, how to do them, how to get your report on this channel, so feel free to check that out. So today we want to talk about the combined solution of the block analysis system. The system is designed to decomplexify the dosing processes because there's a lot of elements that can and need to be dosed. So far it's usually the single element solutions that are used, and then you end up with around 30, I think, individual bottles. So the system here is to make it simpler and not have 30 bottles but only 5, and these 5 bottles contain elements that are grouped together due to the consumption of these elements. If they have similar functions, then they are often used in a ratio towards one another. So that makes it possible to use a combined solution to counteract to deficiencies that could be detected with the ICP. And as always, test first and dose second. Always better to know what's in the tank rather than putting stuff in. So with the ICP you can detect deficiencies, and if you have deficiencies of certain elements or element groups, then you can balance these deficiencies with the combined solutions, but also with the single element solutions if you want. The combined solutions also have the benefit that there is one indicator element, molybdenum, that can be measured really well with the ICP, because some of the elements in these 5 groups are present in really low concentrations or are a bit more difficult to measure with the ICP, meaning the data you get are not as reliable. If the indicator element is low, it's likely that the other elements in this group also are rather low. In the unusual case, and every tank is different, so it's very complex systems, biological ecosystems with a lot of bacterial activity. It can always happen that certain element is consumed more for a certain duration, then you could potentially end up with a low molybdenum while having a higher tungsten or vanadium. And in that case, then it wouldn't make that much sense to add more of the vanadium or tungsten. In these cases, then you can still use a single element solution. But usually for a normal tank, that should be kind of balanced. And these combined solutions also can be used for really unusual tanks, like a macroalgae dominated tank where you have more consumption of halogens, or if you have a tank that consumes trace metals due to the type of corals that are in there, then you can use the according solutions to outbalance that. So in this solution here, the indicator element is molybdenum. Molybdenum is super important for many enzymes. There's a lot of enzymes that have a so-called MoCo, a molybdenum cofactor. It's a molybdenum containing compound that is attached to an enzyme. So the whole enzyme is relying on this cofactor to fulfill its functions. And these enzymes are involved in many metabolic functions, especially also in the nitrogen cycle in our tanks. So the nitrogen cycle, since we usually run recirculating tanks or recirculating systems, the nitrogen cycle needs to be functional. All the elements that are essential for the bacterial functions need to be provided. So molybdenum is used in corals, in enzymes, to make nitrogen compounds more easily available, like transform nitrate into other compounds that makes it easier for the coral to use the nitrogen. Another element that we have in here that is very interesting and important is the vanadium. Vanadium is an essential element for tunicates and sponges. I'm a big fan of sponges, I have to say. They're really interesting, very diverse. They produce a lot of different compounds. They have different functions. There are little biofiltration machines. And if you have a healthy system running for a longer time, then often you have very diverse sponge communities in the darker areas. And these sponges need the vanadium for their enzymatic activity to make compounds available for themselves. Algae also take up vanadium, and also in the coloration processes in corals, especially for sponges, they really need it. And sponges often have a nice side effect. They filtrate the water. They're really porous, and inside these pores they have so-called, I don't even know the English name actually. These are some Kragengeißelzelle in German. It's a cell that has a little cilia, like a hair, that can be moved, and that creates the water flow through the sponge that makes the sponge able to filter the water. And these cells are often replaced and replenished, so the sponge releases the used cells, and these cells can be taken up by corals and are a good coral food. So if you have a healthy sponge community in your tank, then the corals benefit from that as well. Another element in here, the tungsten. German it's called Wolfram, so a little German lesson on the side. So the tungsten is a metal, can be also grouped as a heavy metal. So that already implies can be toxic in high concentrations. And of course, if you have corroding metals or the casing of a magnet is leaking and salt water is getting in and the tungsten is then leaching out in a dissolved form, that can create problems, of course. So it's also good to test the ICP to make sure you don't have any corrosion. But tungsten at the same time is also relevant for anaerobic enzymes that grow in the areas that have very little oxygen. So these bacteria rely on the tungsten for their enzymes. For tungsten, there is no single element solution because it's not that essential for the entire system. But of course, we want to make sure it's available in case our specific system needs it. So better have it than need it. Another element that has been in the shadows for a while is the rubidium. Rubidium is present in seawater. That's one reason why it's also present in here, to guarantee an availability to make the natural composition of the seawater. But it turned also out it's relevant in the central nervous system in mammals. So for your orcas at home, might be a little add-on. No, just joking. So for corals, as far as I know, it's not yet determined to be essential or biologically of high relevance, but research goes on, and who knows what will be discovered for this element. So since it also is not detrimental, it's not toxic, I think we now come to the really minor trace elements, tellur and hafnium. These two, as of today, are not known to have biological functions, but well, who knows what is going to be discovered. They are present in really low concentrations. And with this solution, you can make sure that they are available in case some bacteria would like to have some of it. I think we covered a lot of what's in the bottle. Let's have a look what's on the bottle. There's a description in different languages, also of course in English, of how much you should add per day. So you will get a recommendation according to the deficit. If there's a deficit for this, it's also 2 milliliters per 100 liters per day, which equals 26 US gallons. There's also recommended maximum dosage that should not be exceeded. And for this bottle, it's the 4 milliliters per day, which would then add 6 microgram of molybdenum. And with these dosages, you're in a really safe range. Should be able to provide what your organisms need. And if you like to read, there is more to read, of course. On the inside, there's a description of the block analysis system, of the elements of this particular bottle, what they're doing, what they're good for, why you should dose them, how you should dose them. If you have any questions or comments, please post them and we'll make sure to answer. Happy testing, happy dosing, happy reefing. See you next time. Bye-bye.